fifth generation Floridian. And I represent a city that is now 20% Latino. Representative Garcia just mentioned the Puerto Rican, Cuban population throughout the state. We have some cities that are now as much as 50% Latino. The city of Sarasota is the first city, and I hope that of many more to come, in addition to churches and civic societies that signed the Florida Compact, which is really interesting. It started in Utah, that's the most conservative state in the union, but somehow in the city signing this, it is seen to be, you know, anathema to what good American democracy is if you listen to some folks. I want to challenge today to all of our media that's here, everyone that's present watching from home, all of our church organizations that we just had a prayer vigil at 10:30 this morning, just 2 blocks away with pastors, the Catholic bishop of my community from Venice, Florida, all rabbis talking about the gold standard of the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, is to love an immigrant. And where are we now, and where is compassionate conservatism? Where are we as a state when too often it seems that the gap between the ideals of what the American democracy was founded upon are so great, and that the chasm is growing every day from where we are headed? I'm just going to recap, I think, some really critically important points. That immigration policy is the purview of our federal government. It is not the purview of an ad hoc policy of 50 separate states, and we should recognize that the election was over in November, and that the magnitude of unintended consequences that are not being studied and not being discussed, the impacts that those have in terms of unfunded mandates on cities and counties throughout the state of Florida, not to mention on families' lives, with splitting apart families, putting people on the welfare roll by virtue of creating single-parent families, etc., is really ridiculous. And it's incumbent upon all of us to start speaking truth to ignorance on these types of issues like anchor babies. It is an incredibly derogatory term. It's incredibly false. But we need the media support in telling that story. We need the media support in telling the story that in the worst recession since the Great Depression, our agriculture industry grew $1 billion in exports last year, putting over 80,000 people to work. If you go to our fields, 99% of those fields are migrant labor. What will happen to our agricultural industry if these types of things pass? We used to think in our citrus industry that my family that I grew up in, we used to think that it would be canker or freeze that would destroy us. We never thought it would be Tallahassee. Let's start working together to address the wedge issue, to expose all of the factual truths of this, and also appreciate the fact that the history of this state was founded upon migrant labor. The entire growth of our economy has consistently been upon the backs of migrant labor. Leave the hypocrisy aside and start getting back to the work of the state of Florida that is addressing a $3.5 billion state deficit and getting the economy of this state back in order. So thank you all for being here and participating.
El alcalde de Sarasota, en Sarasota pasaron una resolución en contra de estas leyes. Ya la pasaron.
Ya lo hicimos hace un mes.
¡Que vivan los campesinos! ¡Que vivan los inmigrantes! La voz del pueblo a través del teatro, y le damos la bienvenida al teatro que viene a presentar la perspectiva del pueblo. The perspective of the people.
Dale.
Yeah, we can talk to you.
Dame que te filmo eso si querés. Dame que te filmo eso si querés. Con esta mano.
No, ya está. Esto ya lo filmo.
Eso del teatro, ¿no?
Esto sí lo va a filmar.
So who's making money off of this? Because obviously we're not creating jobs, we're not advancing higher education, we're not helping the environment, we're not stopping foreclosures. So who is really making the money off of this? And there's certain companies that were behind and had connections to the law being passed in Arizona, and they happen to have a presence here too. They happen to be some of the privatized companies that own some of the currently existing detention centers we have in Florida. So what we really have is that the criminalization of immigrants as a scapegoat is essentially an immigrant money-making machine. We get people who are mothers, we get people who work in agriculture, we get people who work in construction, we then have people who are professionals and students. And we put them in these detention centers. Why? Because there's empty beds and there's money to be made off of putting them in those beds. So the Benjamins are just flying everywhere. It's all about the money. And that's what this is about. This is not about making our communities safer. This is not about creating jobs. This is not about events and education. It's not about any of those things. It's about criminalizing people and making money off of them.
Como ven, entran los inmigrantes, los estudiantes, los campesinos, los profesionales, y hay una máquina que criminaliza, que lucra por el sufrimiento y la detención de los inmigrantes. There's a machine that criminalizes immigrants, and we come in and we come out as criminals, even though we are not criminals. And there's profiteering off of the suffering of people, because there's a drive to fill empty beds in detention centers and in prisons. And that is what this theater critique is about. Un aplauso al teatro popular. Abajo la criminalización. When police enforce immigration, victims and witnesses of crime fear coming forward. That makes us less safe. Years of investment in community policing overnight will be destroyed by these bills. Police officers are being asked to do more for less. Not only are they threatened to lose their pensions, but now we're giving them more work, diverting them from public safety. Before we move on to our community speakers, I want to give a chance to our elected remaining to say some statements and some words. Representative Darren Soto, who voted against this bill in the House Judiciary Committee.
Thank you. I have the honor of representing East Orlando and Kissimmee in the Florida Legislature. Yo tengo el honor para representar, arriba mi hermano, el área de Orlando y Kissimmee in la representantes de Florida. And when tourists arrive at the Orlando International Airport, it says welcome, bienvenido, benevuto, and how many other ways to say welcome. And what this bill does is fly in the face of that message. It is clear we don't have the funds. Está claro, nosotros no tenemos los fondos para policía para estas investigaciones. It's clear that this is going to affect jobs in tourism and agriculture in a negative manner. Este va a afectar trabajos en agricultura y turismo de una manera negativa. Y the last thing that I am concerned about is racial profiling. El preocupación último yo tengo es la discriminación. If a person in the eye of the beholder of the police officer doesn't look American, are they the ones who are going to be watched more closely now? Si una persona aparece no como un americano en los ojos de la policía, ellos no van a estar una persona para enfocar. This is not the Florida that I believe we are, and this is the Florida we will fight for going forward. Este no está la Florida por mi idea, y yo voy a luchar para adelante para parar este proyecto de ley malo. Gracias.
Los americanos somos blancos, negros, rojos, amarillos, de todos los colores. We're all Americans. Somos la Florida. We're all Florida. I want to introduce Representative Mark Pafford, who's here with us today.
Thank you, everybody. And listen, it comes down to this. Oddly enough, it's St. Patrick's Day. We're here celebrating diversity in this country. But St. Patrick was known for one thing. He was known for getting those snakes out of Ireland. There's one thing that you can do in 2012 is to register to vote and kick the snakes out of Tallahassee. That is also your responsibility. Keep us accountable, and thank you.
And finally, our last elected official who's here standing with us, Rick Kirschner.
Good afternoon. and I am very proud to be standing here with you today. You know, I think it's really interesting when we all consider the fact that what have we seen happen up here in Tallahassee so far as this session has started? We've seen attempts to take jobs away, and now we see this bill, which is another attempt to take jobs away. So you have to ask yourself, what are these people thinking? What are they thinking? Do they have no heart? Do they not care? The other thing you have to ask yourself is, how many of these people that are for this bill weren't immigrants either themselves or their families or their families' families? They all have been immigrants at one time, and they got here. Now they don't want anyone else here. Sorry, that's not right. That's not Florida, and that's not the United States of America. That's not how we do things.
Thank you very much to our elected officials who are here representing the true interests of Florida, not their party, not their political ambition, but the true interests of Florida. Thank you. We've heard. Gracias. Somos Florida. 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 We love Florida. We are Florida. From every corner of this peninsula. Are there here people from Miami? Aquí hay gente de Palm Beach. Gente de Lakeland. Gainesville. ¿De dónde? Apopka. Immokalee. Presente, we are Florida. We've heard from Faith. We've heard Pinellas. We've heard from Faith. We've heard from elected officials. We've heard from business. And we want to now hear from the working people of Florida, the organized working people of Florida that every day sweat, blood and tears to make ends meet, to get their families, to drive this economy, U.S.-born workers, immigrant workers together, defending the working people of Florida. And we have the pleasure of Mike Williams, State President of the American Federation of Labor, CIO, AFL-CIO. ¡Que vivan los trabajadores!
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to be with you. And let me tell you, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. When you walk in that Capitol building, let me remind you, this is not their house. This is your house. They're just temporarily occupying our house for maybe November of 2012, and we're going to change that, aren't we? I just want to share with you this. Organized labor is all about working middle-class families. We are one. We are one in Florida. We are one for all workers and all families in the state of Florida, no matter where you come from, no matter what the color of your skin is, no matter what your religious background is, no matter what you do for a living, no matter how many people you have in your family, no matter what you drive, no matter how you earn a day's living every day, we are one in the state of Florida. Organized labor behind you. These people in the legislature that was elected in 2010, you know, we've got them right where we want them.